You're listening to a Monster Kid podcast.
Welcome to A Dingo Ate My Movie, a podcast featuring the weird and wonderful Australian genre movies from the 70s, 80s and beyond. I'm your host Pete, and today Tab and I are off to the school formal to discuss The Loved Ones. It stars Xavier Samuel, Robin McLeavy and John Brumpton. It was directed by Sean Byrne and was released in 2009.
You come to the prom?
Yeah, I'm going with Holly.
Wow, you look wicked. Let me get the door, milady.
Prettiest picture.
Will you go to the dance with me?
Sorry, Oma. I'm going with Holly. Guess who asked me to the dance?
Hey.
Hi, this is Brent. Leave a message.
Brent's done this before. He's always turned up.
Ola.
What are you looking at?
Say happy.
Happy. Suck it. Show me! When I find my prince, this is the song we're gonna dance to. And there's only one way to find out if it's you.
Boys shouldn't hit girls.
I'm going to stab Holly in the heart, just like you did to me.
So hey Tab, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's so great to have you back on the show again. It's been it was a great show last time, and looking forward to another session.
Yeah, I hope I didn't scare you too much by picking this one. It's a brutal movie.
Oh my God, it was like this has been in my periphery for a long time, and I hadn't really, seen it, and I'd seen it pop up occasionally on, I think I saw it pop up on Netflix once and on Stan, which is a local streaming service. But I never really watched it. So when you mentioned it, I said, oh, okay, this is a really good opportunity. And I thought about it because I thought, oh, it'd be nice for the show to maybe look at movies that are a little bit more modern as well, to sort of have that, the light and shade, I guess, for want of a better term. And this was a good pick, and it's blown me away.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully you enjoyed some of it at least.
Oh, I did. I thought it was really good. I actually found on second viewing it was even better. So.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
It was good. Yeah, it's interesting when you know what's going on, so it's good.
Yeah.
So, just as a summary, I think I just copied my summary this time. It's basically just when Brent turns down his classmate Lola's invitation to the prom, she concocts a wildly violent plan for revenge, and that pretty much sums up the whole movie, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's a very, in a lot of ways, for me, it was a first watch, so I was really surprised. I didn't know anything what to expect. I didn't even look at the trailer going in. I thought, I'm not going to look at the trailer. I'm just going to go straight into it. So I was like, is this a horror movie? is this like torture porn, or is it like a teen romance movie? Is it like Mean Girls sort of thing? And it sort of plays like all those movies together. There's a lot of unsettling bits in the movie to me. I thought there was some really creepy stuff that we'll talk about later. Most of all, that relationship between Lola and her father is really creepy. And yeah, so it was I really enjoyed it though. It was great. It was a great watch. How about you?
I saw this several years ago, kind of when it first came out. I heard some buzz about it in the horror community, and then a podcast that I really liked. It was like the first horror podcast I ever listened to, and actually made me want to start podcasting. It's called Bloody Good Horror. They covered it, and it sounded so interesting that I was like, oh, I got to check this out. And gosh, it was probably more extreme than most of the movies that I was used to at that time. But I remember liking it quite a bit and then feeling weird that I liked it, because there are some really genuinely disturbing things in this movie.
Yeah, there is. It's there's a lot of bits in this that are quite, I wouldn't say challenging to watch, but when you're watching them, I'm sort of sitting there and you kind of, and I haven't done it for a long time with a movie. I was kind of squirming a little bit, and it's like, oh, and it wasn't so much the gore bits, it's the other bits that were unsettling, you know.
Yeah.
So it was great.
Yeah, some of like the body horror and what they were doing to him really got to me too. And it's funny because it impacted me as much as it did the first time I watched it. I knew it was coming, but I was still like, oh no, that looks so painful.
Yeah, he looked like he went through a lot.
Oh,
it was
gosh, yeah.
Well, a few of them did. So yeah, so it's great. Where did you watch it? Like, what did you watch it on?
I think at this point I was renting it from Netflix.
Okay.
Like on a DVD.
Okay, yeah. Wow, yeah. So for me, it was, I couldn't find it anywhere here. Like, it wasn't on Netflix, it wasn't on Stan anymore because I saw it there once. It wasn't on Amazon Prime.
Oh wow.
So I had to rent it on Apple TV, and I think it's also on Amazon Prime to rent and Google Play as well. So
yeah, it's actually on Prime in the States now.
oh, okay. So there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, here you can only rent it on Prime, so I did it on Apple TV. So it's quite an interesting movie. You can't really find it anywhere. The only, like, I looked all over the place for physical copies, and you could get it. I could get it through Amazon, but it was shipped from the UK, so it was a UK version. And there's apparently a Japanese version that's out of print now, of all things, and they're the only places I've never seen it locally. I can't find it locally at all, unless it's out of print. So
I know we did it for Girls in the Back Row, and I think at that point I ordered the DVD because I do own it.
Right.
But it's also on Prime here currently. And yeah, it's kind of hard to find. I expected it to be on Shudder because that seems like a movie that Shudder would love, and it wasn't there.
Yeah, it would be a perfect Shudder movie, and that's actually the first place I looked was Shudder.
Oh,
I was thinking that would be a perfect spot for it, but unable to do so. So that was fine. So I watched it on Apple TV, and that was fine. That was all good. So yeah, interesting movie. First feature film for Sean Byrne, and they shot it in 4 weeks in Melbourne. It's really interesting for a first film for this guy. Like, I thought it was really, really, really good. He went on to, have you seen The Devil's Candy? He went on to do that as well. He wrote and directed that.
I did see that, but I guess I didn't realize that was him. So when I read that in your notes, I was like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. Because there's a lot of metal stuff in this as well.
Okay.
There's several people that are metal fans that are characters. And then also the really intense style is definitely there.
Yeah, for sure. I haven't seen it, but now I've got it on my watch list. So can't remember, when was that? 2015, I think that was released, something like that. Yeah. I was able to find out, I couldn't really find the information anywhere. Apparently the budget was $4 million and it only recouped about $400,000 globally. This is what I listened to a quick podcast last night, someone else doing it from a few years ago.
Oh, okay.
And that's where I picked that up, because I couldn't find that on IMDb. I think it had the grosses as about 380,000 or something like that on IMDb. Strangely, it was never released theatrically in Australia.
Oh, I'm
which
so
is
surprised about that.
yeah,
I
I
figured
know.
it would be released here because it was made here, you know?
You would think so, right? You would
Right.
think so. And I think it was fairly limited release in the US. Some of the sort of theatrical trailers and stuff I saw were like call your or whatever, email this address to get it, in your local cinema or something like that. That would give a bit of push.
Oh, yeah. I I don't remember it being in theaters anywhere where I lived because I was living in Denver at the time. It
Right.
definitely seems like something that would have been in like Alamo Draft House if that had existed at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think everything I saw it for was DVD. So
Yeah. I don't know who owns the rights to it, but it'd be great to see Umbrella do that one as well. That'd be a really nice release for them.
oh yeah,
So
and I think my DVD is pretty bare bones. Like it didn't really have any special features at all.
yeah, it'd be definitely worthwhile. I think it seems to have from what I understand, it seems to have a bit of a cult following.
Mhm.
It's like I think 83 or something percent or 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's in their top 100 horror movies of all time
Oh
as well.
wow.
So yeah, so it's quite well liked. So
Yeah, when you posted about it on Twitter, people seem to be like chiming in, like, "Oh, I love this movie." So I was glad
yeah,
I wasn't
yeah.
the only one that was
Yeah.
excited about it.
Yeah, it's I really enjoyed it. I'm still sort of processing it, but
Right.
we'll go through that, I guess. Initially it was given an R rating here, like it was when it was released on video, I guess. They appealed it and they got an MA-15 because of the comedy aspect. And this one of the things I think this movie is as well. The other thing I was thinking, is it like a dark comedy? It is almost like a dark comedy as well, right? It's got so many little bits that are kind of, amusing. Or
Yeah.
am I just sick?
No, I felt the same thing. I think I have that in my notes later where there were moments when I almost like kind of not like a real laugh, but kind of like, haha, because
Yeah.
something sort of funny or ironic happened. And then you feel
Yeah.
weird about laughing because it's such a
Yeah.
dark movie.
Exactly. The bit, I think, I'm trying to think of the bit. We'll get to it anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah. So Sean Byrne asked Robin McLeavy, who played Lola, to prepare by researching Jeffrey Dahmer of all people, and had to watch Misery, Natural Born Killers, and some Quentin Tarantino movies. So that's quite interesting there in regards to, I don't know. You've done a few things on Jeffrey Dahmer. Can you see the link there?
I mean, the biggest thing would, I guess, would be injecting him with cleaning fluid and then also trying to like basically make him a zombie. That's something that Jeffrey Dahmer did.
Okay.
But I would say she's probably closer to something like Misery than
that's what I
Jeffrey
thought.
Dahmer.
Yeah, I thought it had like little, you could see bits of Misery in it in a way. So yeah, it was cool. It was cool. And then the other thing I read, that Lola Stone is an anagram for lost and alone.
Huh. Okay.
And then the lead character, Brent, has no dialogue after 27 minutes in the movie. That's it. The rest of the movie, he's like just making guttural sounds and groaning.
Yeah, I have to tell you, that actor, I felt like my voice hurt after listening to him scream. He did such a good job, and I don't know if they altered it and post in any way, but it really seemed like they had damaged his vocal cords or something because he was.
Yeah, it was terrible. That sound was awful. And when they had that pit full of the other, I think there's 2 or 3 others in there, it was like a terrible sound. And you could and I was thinking, when he, when the movie ended, I was like, do you think they're able to repair his vocal cords? Is this going to be what he's going to be like the rest of his life? I'm like,
right.
Anyway, so yeah. And the other bit, and we kind of touched on this, was a lot of the advertising for the film, including the theatrical release poster, were talking about Lola wanting Brett to be her prom date. And in Australia, of course, we don't have proms. We just have school formals, or what they call school formals, or the school dance, and they call it a formal because you have to dress up. Most people don't dress up, but so yeah, it's interesting.
From what I've seen, most other countries don't have prom the way we have prom, because prom is like almost like going to a wedding or something, like, you know, the tuxes and people wear like straight up gowns. But everything I've seen for other countries, like formal dances, you kind of wear
Yeah.
like a nice dress or a shirt and a tie, but you're not like getting dressed to the nines or
Yeah,
anything.
yeah. Can't remember my school formal. Would have been in 1978, I guess. But I have some vague memories of it. I remember we had to learn the Pride of Erin or something, one of those dances or something. Yeah. So yeah, it was a bit formal that way. The only other thing coming out of this movie is there was a guy called Gary George. I think this is in the UK. He murdered a fellow called Andrew Knoll, and the judge at the time described the torture murder as a reenactment of the scene of the film. And apparently the judge described how the defendant particularly liked The Loved Ones as a movie. And what he did to this fellow is basically beat him. There was 49 knife wounds, and they found cleaning fluid in his eyes. So, so yeah, he was sentenced to life imprisonment, unsurprisingly. And yeah, it's awful when you hear stories like that. It sort of gives movies a bad name.
Yeah, and I always get frustrated with this kind of thing, because then people are like, oh, well, horror movies made this kid bad. And it's like, if he was going to do that, he was going to do it regardless of what movie he watched. That has nothing to do with it.
No, I hate that whole debate on, horror movies are the cause of it. I'm like, no, people are the cause of it, not
Right.
the horror movie. They're always, if someone's fucked up, they're fucked up, and
Yeah,
it
and
doesn't matter.
And they're going to seek out violent things. So
Yeah.
it's, they're seeking that out for that particular reason, not, it's not the movies turning them violent. Yeah, I totally agree.
It just
it's
takes something to trigger them. It could just as easily be them watching Winnie the Pooh, I guess, or something like that. So.
Yeah, or reading a true crime book or watching the news. There's plenty of violent stuff on the news too.
Oh God, lots of horror in the news.
Yeah.
So yeah. As you know, I always go into the music a bit when I can. So I took a few notes here, and the original soundtrack was composed by Ollie Olsen. So he was probably best known. He collaborated with Michael Hutchence, and they formed a band called Max Q. And they released the title in 1989. It had a single on it called Way of the World, released number 8 in the Australian charts. Not sure if it charted anywhere else, but it was a cool little song. I remember that. So that, obviously everyone knows Michael Hutchence, right?
Right, from In Excess.
In Excess, and it's a great song. If you get a chance to listen to it, you can't find, it's not on any of the streaming services, unfortunately, but I found it on YouTube.
Gotcha.
So as you find everything else, you can't find it on YouTube.
And if you don't work, if you don't obey, they'll make you live in fear till your dying day. Those who got the gun to your head with religions, corporations, proud of blood they've shed. It's just the same, and it's only fear under another name. Never is it's just the same, and it's only fear under another name. And the corporate snakes coming in to feed on that pathetic fact.
So yeah, and then I guess the song most people remember if you've watched that film is Pretty Enough by Casey Chambers.
Am I not pretty enough? Is my heart too broken? Do I cry too much? Am I too...
I will never hear this song the same way again after this. So
Yeah, I think I had only heard it in this movie. I had not heard it other than this.
yeah, that was a pretty big hit here.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Back in 2001, so it was on her second album.
I live, I breathe, I let it rain on me. I sleep, I wake, I try hard not to break. I crave, I love, I've waited long enough. I try as hard as I
actually she's very successful in Australia. She's had like 12, 13 albums she's released, and she's big country. She's won like the Golden Guitar, which is like the Australian Country Music Award, once or twice, and she's in the ARIA Hall of Fame and stuff like that. So she's very, very popular. She had quite a few hits, and this was kind of her breakthrough song. There's a few others. I think I bought the first album. Her first album was called The Captain, and it had some quite good songs on it as well. And it's kind of, I guess she's one of those artists now that even though she's country, you'd probably see her when I looked it up on Apple Music. She's down as like pop.
Gotcha.
And country, depending on the album, but yeah, Pretty Enough I'd say is kind of country pop anyway. So
almost like
a great song.
Taylor Swift when she first started out. 'Cause she started out as a country artist.
Exactly. Yeah, she never got as big as Taylor Smith. but yeah, it's the song in the context it's in this movie is just really weird. But yeah, it's unforgettable.
Yeah, I think every time I hear it, I'll picture Lola walking down the road singing it.
Am I not pretty enough? Is my heart too broken? Do I cry too much? Am I too outspoken? Don't I make you laugh? Should I try harder? Why do you see right through me? Why do you see?
End of the movie.
Yeah.
And then the movie opens with "Lonesome Loser" by the Little River Band, which is really weird, but it sets the scene, right? Because it's the father in the car, and he's listening to sort of daggy music, and they're having this whole conversation about dad music and all this sort of stuff, and yeah, it's pretty cool. But I was really surprised when it went into that, because that intro of that song is very in your face.
Yeah, very recognizable.
Have you heard about the lonesome loser, beaten by the queen of hearts every time? Have you heard about the lonesome loser? He's a loser, but he still keeps on trying.
Yeah, very recognizable. And I was kind of like, whoa, what's this Little River Band in this movie? Okay, so yeah. There's other artists on the soundtrack, Cosmic Psychos, which are kind of like an Australian sort of punk band. Sophie Kev, Parkway Drive. A lot of these artists I haven't heard of. I think I've heard of Parkway Drive. You heard of them?
They sound familiar, but I feel like I'm so behind on newer music.
Yeah.
Newer being like 2000s.
Yeah. Yeah, but the music's quite interesting. There's a lot of heavy metal in the music in the soundtrack.
Yeah.
And then, as just a little tidbit, I put in like there's an Australian band that was in 1965 called The Loved Ones, and they had a hit with a song called The Loved One. And then going back to Michael Hutchence, In Excess covered that song back in 1981. So,
Wow, that's a really cool
yeah,
coincidence. Although I bet
it is.
Sean Byrne probably knew that. Like he seems
He
very
probably did. Yeah.
music centric because
Yeah.
Devil's Candy is all about metal music. And
Right.
so I would not be surprised a bit if he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna name my movie that," you know?
Yeah. I was kind of half expecting to hear the song.
Yeah,
In,
maybe they couldn't get the
in
rights.
oh, maybe it could be. Yeah, it might be the way. Eh? It's I was sort of thinking, oh, they're gonna have to play the song eventually, right? But they didn't. So
You would
so
think
yeah.
since the guy that wrote the score knew Michael Hutchence, he could have got the NXS version.
Exactly right. Yeah.
At least,
So,
you know?
yeah, all the music rights, though, I guess. So
Yeah.
it would probably cost them a fortune just getting Pretty Enough. So,
Oh gosh, yeah. Especially if it was that popular.
yeah, and it's like, yeah, once again, that song I'll never hear it the same way.
Oh, absolutely.
So let's get into the plot a little bit. So we've got at the beginning of the movie, Brent is driving with his father, and they're I don't know, going home or wherever they've been out,
Mhm.
and suddenly this bloodied man standing in the middle of the road causes him to swerve and have an accident. And you find out later, obviously, that the bloodied person is someone that's been through this whole ordeal with Lola. So he swerves and they have an accident. They hit a tree and kills his father. And then we're suddenly 6 months later and we're dealing with the whole, story of how he's managing through this. And there's a lot of self-harm and there's a lot of risk-taking behavior.
Yeah.
And he obviously there's a point where he's climbing those rocks. So we're skipping forward a lot, but anyway, there's a point where he's climbing some rocks and he slips, and it's like for a second, it's like, is he going to let himself go and die? And there's that point where he decides no and climbs the rest of the way up the rock. So he's having lots of issues, right?
Right. Yeah.
We're talking about prom night, and he's going to go to the prom with Holly is his girlfriend. Is
Yep.
that right?
Yeah.
Yep. And then Lola Stone asks him to go to the prom while they're standing around at their lockers, and he very politely actually says no. And from that point on, I think everything's in motion. I was thinking at the time, what would have happened if he'd said yes, right? Would she have gone, or do you think she still would have found a way to do what they did?
I think he probably would have come to the house to pick her up, and then they would have done the exact same thing.
Yeah, probably right. You're probably right. Yeah, because I was like, there's a few points in this movie where there's a few sliding doors, and also there's actually a few plot holes in this movie, but it's it's all good. So yeah, so they go to the prom. Oh, well, he doesn't go. He's getting ready to go to the prom, and there's a bit where there's a part where Holly's picking him up, I think from school or something, picking him up from school, taking him home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they decide they're going to they had sex in the car, which is it's fine. That's what teenagers do, I guess. And I was thinking that VW is very big inside, like.
Yeah.
I've been in a VW before. There's not that much room in one.
Right. Exactly. And it's an old one. It's not even like a newer
old one. Exactly. Yeah. And there's that really creepy shot where in the middle of all that, Lola's looking through the window and seeing it all go on. So yeah. So they go to the prom. At the same time, we have that scene where I was talking about before, where Brent is climbing the rocks and going to this spot he obviously goes to quite a bit. And that's where he gets kidnapped from by Lola's father. And I think there's a point there just before, and I can't remember if I saw it in the trailer in the movie, but I noticed it just before he's taken by Lola's father. There's this point where he's, how he's got the necklace with the razor blade on it, and he uses it to cut his hand, and he cuts himself and all that. It looks like he's about to take it off and throw it away. Did you see that?
Yeah, it did look like that to me as well.
Yeah, almost like he's found a point where he's sort of not at peace, but he's kind of decided, okay, it's time to move forward.
Well, and he also has that card that he writes to Holly that she finds later. That says, thanks for doing what all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't do. And he says, he writes, I love you. She had said that to him, and he didn't seem to know how to respond, but he writes it to her.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to me, that kind of indicated the same thing, that he was like almost ready to move on and ready to move forward.
And yeah, and so she takes him home. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is there's these other people in the movie. So we're introduced during all this to Jamie and Mia.
Mm-hmm.
So Jamie's his mate, and Mia's just one of the girls at school, who is the daughter of the policeman, and also the sister of one of the victims, even though they don't know it because he's never been found, right?
Right. I think it's really cool how he sort of puts all these puzzle pieces in front of you and you're not really sure how everything connects, but then
Yeah.
everything sort of starts to line up. Because when I was watching the movie the first time, I remember thinking, why do they keep cutting to this plot? Like, this doesn't seem to be doing anything other than maybe providing a little bit of levity, and then everything sort of starts to line up and you're like, oh wow, that's actually really interesting.
Well, you might be able to help me there because, like, I saw all the scenes with Lola, not with Lola, with Jamie and Mia as like, I don't see this going anywhere. Is it there, like you were saying, is it there just to give us a break? Or when I was watching it last night, I was like, oh, there are kind of parallel points to their night at the prom where it kind of lines up between the two couples as to what's going on. But at the time, I kind of thought that a lot of the Jamie and Mia stuff might have been there just to pad the timing out a bit, but I don't know.
I kind of saw it as, once we find out that the guy standing in the road was her brother, then we understand retroactively why she's acting the way she is. Because at first they don't explain that. She's sort of a goth girl. and
very
is,
much a goth girl.
Right. And is not very polite to her parents. Her parents seem to be like trying to do their best. They want to take pictures of them going to the prom. She seems very standoffish and not interested in entertaining any of that. And the more we see them together, the more like she really has something going on and we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But then as we're like cutting back to Lola and Brent and that whole situation, we're finding out more and more that there's other victims. And then we find out that her brother was one of those victims and that he was the guy standing in the road. And yeah.
I wonder what happened to him. Like, you'd think if there was an accident like that, you would think they would find him.
Unless he just like walked off, I guess. But
where though? Like, I mean, Lola says at one stage, oh, he's probably dead.
Yeah.
Which is fair enough. But I'm like, you would think if he was able to walk, he would have found his way to somebody or somewhere.
Right. It's not like they caught up with him and put him in the basement.
Yeah, exactly. So this is one of the plot holes. I mean,
that is a big plot hole.
Because if they find him, then nothing happens. Nothing else happens because he takes them back to where it all happened, right? And says who it was.
And the carving on his chest is a big sign.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So, but like I said, I mean, there's a million plot holes in all these movies, and you know, it's no big deal. It's just you got to get the story done. So.
Well, yeah, and I'll give the movie this credit. I didn't think about that until afterwards. I wasn't thinking. I think it's because you're so like on edge with everything that's happening. I definitely wasn't thinking about that until after I was revisiting the movie in my head.
Yeah. To be fair, it wasn't until my second viewing I really thought about it.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, hang on, what's going on here? This whole thing could have been stopped. So.
Right.
Brent wakes up in the chair. This is really cool. When you first time you see him, you've got this real sense of like, you don't know what the hell's going on. He doesn't know what the hell's going on, and it's just like crazy. Like, just the whole thing is really crazy in regards to how they deal with him. And anyway, I'll go through really quickly. And effectively, he's tortured. He gets away. We get this part where he runs off and he's being chased down in a car. He decides to climb a tree instead of jumping the fence.
Do they not put the knives through his foot until they? That's right. They don't put the knives through his foot until after. So he could have jumped that fence.
Oh yeah, and he could have jumped the fence quite easily. And at that stage, I guess he was probably in a lot of pain, but he would have been able to, as we saw later, overpower each of them.
Yeah.
Because he's a young man, so he would have been strong.
Well, and I think that scene with him like holding onto the rocks shows he's very physically fit and has a lot of strength. So
yeah, they recapture him because once again we wouldn't have a story if
that's
they
right.
didn't. They take him back, and that's when he gets like nailed to the floor with the knives, which is quite harrowing. We'll talk about these a bit more in depth, but then we basically get to the piece where he's being tortured like massively from this point on. There's that weird scene where they put she's got the paper hat on, like the paper queen and king hat on, and doing the whole thing, and the father's standing behind him, dropping the tinsel or whatever it is.
Oh yeah, the confetti. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really, and that's when we get the really weird scene of her and her father dancing together and almost kissing. I was like, oh, don't do it. And it was like really gross.
Yeah, they push it right to the edge with that.
They really do. And then, basically, he has another chance to get away. Oh God, the drilling of the head. How's that?
Oh boy, like that scene. There's so much that happens that you're just like, oh my gosh, that seems like it would hurt so much. But that scene in particular, and especially that second time when he's like got him in a headlock, and you can really hear the bone crunching. Oh goodness!
I listened to it. Last night. The first time I watched it, May and I watched it just on the TV, and last night I just watched it on the computer here, and had my headphones on. And it was terrible with headphones.
Yeah,
it was awful. And they did it so well because they didn't actually go all sort of like 70s, Italian horror and show you the drill going right into his head. But I think it was worse because they actually had him in the headlock. They were looking from behind. You heard the sound and you could see like the smoke coming from where the drill's going into his skull. And it was like, oh my God. So it turns out they lobotomize people with drilling into their skull and pouring boiling water in.
Mm-hmm.
I assume that works.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I know that like when Jeffrey Dahmer would try stuff like that, usually the person would die. So I don't think it would be a long-term thing. But there is a woman there named that they call Bright Eyes that clearly that's been done to, and she's sort of non-responsive.
Exactly. It turns out it's her mother.
Yeah.
So he gets away, but then there's a trap door. He gets thrown. He kills her father.
Yeah, he's able to like use the razor to cut the ropes, and then with his arms he's able to like basically both use the drill to cut her dad's face open, and then he uses it to cut himself free from his legs, and then I think he pushes him into the pit, all those like weird like people under the stairs kind of people come in and start eating him.
Yeah, that's really weird. I don't know how they would have survived so long down there, but anyway.
Well, they showed a big pile of human bones, so clearly they've been getting people and just killing them to feed them.
And then the cop comes around, like I think Holly, wasn't it? Yeah, contacts the policeman, who's obviously the father of someone who's gone missing before, and says, "Hey, it's probably Lola. This is what I found out." He goes to the house. He looks in the window and sees blood everywhere. But he's like, I'm just going to go in. This is another area that bugged me a little bit, even on first watch. It was like, you're a policeman. Aren't you going to call for backup, right?
You would assume so, right? I mean, I thought of that as well. I was like, if you see that much blood, you're going to call for backup. Come on.
Yeah, you're not going in that house, right? You're going to wait for more cops. And I assume, even though it's a small town, there would have been more than one policeman. But
right.
Although they're trying to make you think there might be only one.
And that moment when she's behind him and then he turns around and gets the axe to the face, that was one of those moments where I almost laughed, and then I was like, oh, I feel so bad about laughing.
Yeah, he gets it and falls down into the pit as well, and then Lola finds, I think that's where she finds the razor blade on the chair that's been left behind,
Yeah, I think it's
and
just
she
laying
really
in a
gets the
pool of
shits.
blood.
Yeah, yeah, and then she throws everything down and gives him all the stuff he actually needs to get out. But anyway, so
Well,
so
she
she gets the
also tells him that she's going to go kill Holly and his mom, and I think that's
yeah,
really
that's
what
right,
gives him the motivation to get out, because
to get out.
he
Yeah,
almost seemed
yeah.
like he had given up at that point.
Yeah, exactly. That's really one of the creepy bits too. When she goes through and says, "Oh, I'm going to go and kill your mum, and then I'm going to kill Holly." The way she says it is
Yes.
kind of quite disturbing.
I'm going to your house now. I'm going to stab your mummy in the neck, just like you did to my daddy. And then I'm going to stab Holly in the heart, just like you did to me.
It's another bit of the movie that I just found she really creeped me out. So she obviously did a really good job.
Oh yeah, I think she did a fantastic job. I think the Xavier Samuel, who plays Brent, did a fantastic job. And that moment where, cause I guess we're jumping ahead, but he ends up getting away, and Holly's like almost driving out to go find him, and then she gets attacked by Lola because Lola walks and it happens to run into her, and then as Brent is driving the cop car as fast as it'll possibly go, it's almost like the very beginning where he sees Holly and swerves around her and then hits Lola.
Yeah.
But that moment where she is crawling down the road and using the knife for leverage, and she looks and sounds just like a zombie. Like she looks like she could be a zombie. That was so creepy. And then they hear the knife hitting the pavement. And they're both like, oh my God, she's still coming. And then he backs over her, obviously. But the way the camera kept getting closer to her face, like everything about her was so creepy and vacant and just disturbing.
Yeah, she did an amazing job. Obviously she looked at all the background info she was told to look at.
Yeah. And then some, because I think there's other aspects to her performance that are way beyond something like Misery or even Jefferson.
Yeah. I think some of the notes I've got is like, I think the notes I wrote separately was like, I put Lola is a A-grade fucking psychotic, right?
Right.
She's so over the top, and I'm like, so my other thing I want to talk about, so pretty much we've talked about, the real rough outline. I'm sure most people who listen to this have either seen it,
right,
or will hopefully go away and see it.
Mm-hmm.
But effectively, like you were saying, she gets killed at the end, which is fine because there was no sequel, which is good.
Right.
It doesn't need a sequel, a movie like this. And I wondered with Lola and her father, how they got to the point that they're at. Do you know what I mean? What brought them to that point of their lives? So, with a lobotomized mother, an incestuous relationship, murder, and all this sort of stuff. What brought them? Where? I don't know. There is no answer, right? But I was just thinking, where is the point in their life where this all starts happening? Does it start happening when she's younger? Is it something that's fairly recent?
I mean, they have the pictures of her, and she's a pretty little girl, and they've already started kidnapping boys.
Yeah.
I had kind of created this headcanon where her dad was almost like an Ivan Milat figure.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And had been killing people prior to her even being born, and then she's kind of messed up, obviously, as a kid, and he starts teaching her about violence. But what's interesting to me about their relationship is, like, I think it's pretty clear he introduced her to this kind of violence, but I think the power dynamic shifted because there were moments where she definitely seemed like she was in charge, and almost to the point where she was like manipulating him.
I thought so too.
Yeah. And that's what's really striking about this film is that pretty much everything that she does is something that if you're a horror fan especially, you've seen a male villain do, and it's the motivation, I guess, she wants a boyfriend is specific to her being a girl, but everything else is it could be a male villain or a female villain. It's not specific to a female villain the way that I've seen other female villains be. And she is like a pure psychopath with no redeeming qualities. And I have to applaud Sean Byrne for going that hard on it, because I don't think I've ever seen anybody go that hard with a female villain before.
Yeah, it's strangely refreshing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's usually a psychotic guy or sometimes, and I also think it's just the way it's played. Sometimes Misery is a great example of a psychotic woman. But there seems to be times in that movie, but I haven't watched it for a while, where it's kind of, would overacted be the right word, but where it's a little bit over the top. Whereas in this movie, it's like, oh yeah, I can understand everything she's doing. She is like so off the rails that it's not funny. I'm surprised she can even keep herself together enough to go to school, right?
Right. I think she's over the top, but it's really balanced out by the way Brent is reacting to everything. Like, he's kind of our lens into this, because everything about this movie is really outsized and borders on being ridiculous, except for Brent. Like, Brent is reacting kind of the way you would expect somebody to react in that situation. And that keeps it a little bit more grounded for sure. And I think also that what saves this movie from being like just torture porn, because it could easily be lumped in if you're just looking at it on a surface level with like the torture porn movies, is that there's a backstory there that kind of explains why people are reacting the way that they are. So, you have Brent, he has a tolerance for pain and he's able to control his reactions because he has a history of self-harm. And that's allowing him to not cry when she's screaming cry in his face.
Yeah, that bit. And yeah, I agree. And I was thinking that the first watch through, I was thinking, well, this is a guy that self-harms a lot. And when they were driving the knives into his feet and all the other stuff, he was, at first there was like that, yes, there's pain. But after a while, you could see he was just kind of like, at peace is the wrong word, but he was kind of like, okay, this is what I've been doing. So he got through it.
Yeah, he was really
You probably put it better than me.
Yeah, he was really internalizing it, I think, the same way that he had done with his emotional pain, certainly. And then also the, self-harm, the physical self-harm. And then you see Mia, and her use of drugs and alcohol and sex is obviously to numb the pain of her brother's disappearance. And I think that's a common thing for survivors of trauma and for people grieving. And I just thought that there was so much more depth than I was expecting from a movie like this. It seems very slick and it's very surface level and like, oh yeah, very clever and look what we did here. But there's more to it than what just meets the eye, which I really appreciated. And I think that, like I said, grounds the more over the top elements, because Lola could be very over the top. But I think you're right. I think she felt very realistic, even though she's doing crazy, crazy things.
Yeah, some of the stuff, like that whole scene with the making him pee into the glass, right? When do you want to go to the toilet, and do you want a number one or number two, and she gets the way she drinks the milk out of the glass first, and then she goes and you can see the milk still in her mouth, sort of thing, and then she tries to get him to do it, and then he's threatened by a hammer and nails, which I'm sure they would have done had he not peed.
Well, she seemed very excited that she was going to be able to get to 10 before he started peeing. And she's clearly just like a sadist. She loved everything they were doing. This throwing the salt, like she's the one that pulls the cap off the salt and throws the whole salt shaker or this whole salt container at him.
Yeah. But then there's all this dark humor. So he pees, right? And then while he's peeing, she goes, "Oh, it's crying."
Yeah.
So just, and then it's really creepy. She's like, oh, I better kiss it better, which for some people would think, oh, that's sexual. But to me, it was just like really creepy. It was like, it was terrible.
Well, and that's the really interesting thing about like flipping the genders of the villain and the victim, because I've seen movies where women are sort of treated in that way, where the person that's victimizing them is being sexual, but it's in such a horrible, disturbing way. And again, it's weird to say it's refreshing, but it's refreshing that it's not happening to a woman, because it's always a female victim.
Yeah. I think the more I think about it, like I said, when I watched it last night again, I enjoyed it, I think, more than the first time. I got more out of it. First time is really, I think the first time you watch this movie, especially if you don't know anything about it, you just sort of feel a bit shocked is probably a very strong word, but you feel a bit shocked. You're like, oh crap, I wasn't expecting all this. And the second time, when you've got all this the knowledge you've learned before, and you already know how it all goes together, then you look a little bit deeper and you go, wow, this is actually quite, there is a lot in the movie, a lot more than its surface value.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like this isn't something that I'd probably recommend to anybody but horror fans. And obviously it's even with horror fans, it's not going to be for everybody. But I think that it's something that is going to be fresh for people who haven't seen it, certainly, because it was definitely it felt that way for me originally watching it, and then when I watched it again for our episode, I was like, yeah, this still feels really cool, and something that isn't really a part of horror in other places.
I really liked it. No, I would definitely recommend people check it out. There's so much in it. Like I said, I got a bit of the dark humor. There was this bit where I think when he's nailing his feet to the ground with knives, which I thought was gross in the first place, not nails. There's the line where what's the father's name?
They just call him Daddy. He's only credited as Daddy. Yeah.
He said this one's for the Kingswood riot, which I'm sure goes over a lot of people's heads.
I didn't know.
But to me, I was like, oh, this is a reference. So there used to be a show in Australia in the 70s called Kingswood Country. And it was about, you would never see it on TV now because it's so politically incorrect that it's not funny. But it was a comedy, and the big tagline from it was, so the guy, the main character, the guy's name was Ted Bullpit, and he had a Kingswood, which was a make of car in Australia, Holden Kingswood. And something would happen to the car or something like that, and his big catchphrase was always, not the Kingswood.
It's all arranged, Dad. We're going to have a barbecue and then stay out overnight and come back in the morning, and I'll need to take the car.
The Kingswood? You're not taking the Kingswood.
Dad.
Just put new Venetians in it.
Dad.
And I got the feeling looking at this, I'd like, oh, okay, maybe that's a callback to that, because he's like, this one's for the Kingswood. So, and that's the truck that he was driving was a Kingswood.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so I think that was a callback to that. I'd like to find out whether it was really or not, but I thought that was pretty cool callback if that was the case. Well, it was to me anyway. So
exactly. That's really cool. I don't know. I think, obviously I'm not from Australia, and so I'm looking outside from outside as far as Australian cinema, but this movie and a lot of the other movies I've seen continue that theory that I have, that Australian films just have this different quality that that doesn't exist anywhere else. The black humor, the some really brutal movies. Like Australia and New Zealand are able to get gore and just go ham with it, and and it doesn't feel gratuitous, and maybe because of that black humor.
Because this isn't a scary movie, right? By any means, it's not scary in like there's no jump scares, there's no it works on a few other different levels with horror. So it's really interesting. Like you're talking about New Zealand. Have you seen Black Sheep?
Yes, Chris and I went to see that in the theater. They had it at a midnight movie.
It's so good. It's such a great
It
movie.
is.
I love that
Chris
movie.
is
So,
not a horror fan. Chris is my husband.
right.
He's not a horror fan, but he loved Black Sheep. He thought it was so funny and so much fun.
Oh, it's hilarious. It's so good. Yeah, it's great. And then there's what's the Peter Jackson one? Is it Dead
Dead
Alive?
Alive, and then
That's
the
so
one that
good.
you suggested for your first Patreon episode, Body
Oh,
Melt.
Body Melt?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many like that, and this one actually, this is why I chose to do this one, because I was like, this is 2009, but this is classic Ozploitation. Sort of, it's got all the hallmarks. You know, it's got very Australian things. It's got the over the top violence. It's got the humor. It's got all that sort of stuff. It's got the feel. It's got that feel.
I agree, and I was, when I asked about it, I wasn't sure if that was Ozploitation enough, but I think it does have all those elements.
Yeah. I think also if I just stay really in that Ozploitation thing too tightly, I'm eventually going to run out
That's
of
true.
movies. So there's a couple others that I'd like to do that are sort of there. I actually watched Wolf Creek for the first
what'd
time
you think?
a week ago. We sat down and we watched both of them together. I thought the first one was fantastic. I thought the second one was okay. The only thing I find about those movies that doesn't really do it for me is, as much as John Jarratt is fantastic, right, in those movies, he's amazing. But the character doesn't seem, there's never any comeuppance for him, really. All that happens is someone might escape.
Right.
And that's it. So I don't really feel like there's any classic sort of, resolution to the terrible things he's been doing. Now I know they're making a third one.
Oh, are they?
And I don't know whether they're going to change that, whether they're going to close it out or something like that. But the fact that he kind of does all that stuff and at the end of the day gets away and just fades into the background, it's almost like they're trying to create some sort of legend, I guess. Yeah, I would have liked to seen him, at least be challenged a bit more. I just feel with those movies, sometimes the violence is there for violence sake, but there's no real, he doesn't get anything back for what he's putting out. Like there's no one fights back. It doesn't seem like anyone really fights back with him.
Yeah, I think when your antagonist is too powerful, then it starts to be not as much, not that it's not as much fun, but not as interesting, and it almost becomes like something like Friday the 13th, where it becomes about the kills. But even with that, like, we're much more accepting of Jason and Michael Myers being always coming out of it on top and not ever getting killed because they're supernatural figures, and he's not a supernatural figure, so that doesn't make sense.
No, but see, at the end of those movies, whether it's a Halloween movie or a Friday the 13th or even a Nightmare on Elm Street, there's usually a final girl or somebody that will somehow defeat them. So with the Wolf Creek movies, he doesn't really ever really get defeated, inverted commas. And to me, that's kind of like, I enjoyed it with the first movie. It was great. Second movie, I found that the first movie I watched, I didn't look at my phone the whole time. I can always tell when I'm getting a bit bored with a movie and I'll start looking at my phone. And I found with the second one, there was times where I was like having a quick look at my phone and not losing interest completely, but just kind of going, oh, this is a bit, I don't know. What do you do? Have you seen both?
I've only actually seen the first one, and I know they.
Okay.
I think they did a series as well.
Yeah, there's a TV series. Yeah,
but I remember liking the first one quite a bit, but I also didn't know about the Ivan Milat backpacker case, which it's loosely based on.
Yeah.
And once I found out the details of that, I was kind of like, well, the real case is so much worse in comparison that it doesn't, the real case is more interesting. I'd rather read about that. So I think that's probably why I didn't go into the second one.
Yeah, the second one's probably worth a look in regards to, it expands on the character a little bit, and you can see he's responsible for a little bit more than what he was, thought in the first movie. But yeah, I was kind of like, I'll watch a third one, but it'd be nice to have some resolution where he gets some comeuppance at the end.
I would imagine they'd have to kind of wrap it up because John Jarrett's getting up there, isn't he? As far as age.
Yeah, he is fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
though, right, in this movie. He's
Well,
really good.
in the first one, man, he's just so charming, and you're like, oh no, I hate this guy, but you can't
Yeah.
help but kind of like him in a weird way too.
He's
Yes.
charismatic. Yeah, he's charismatic. Yeah, yeah. And the way he lulls
Yeah,
people in.
yeah.
So anyway, we're talking about the old ones.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry.
That's
I was just excited you had seen Wolf Creek.
Yeah, I've been, and for someone that does like an Ozploitation podcast, I should have seen it years ago because I guess it is Ozploitation. So, but I haven't. So there you go. But I've seen them now. We just had a afternoon because we're locked in. We can't go anywhere, and we thought, oh, let's get a bit of popcorn out and watch a couple of movies. So we watched those two, and then May had me watch. She said it's my turn now, and she had a DVD from years ago. Have you seen a movie called The Gods Must Be Crazy? This is completely different. This is not horror.
I've seen parts of it, but
it's like from the 70s or the 80s, and it's this really weird comedy, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to like this at all, but it was so funny. It was really good.
My dad put that on, but it was really late at night, and I think I fell asleep halfway through.
Okay, because I was looking it up while we were watching it. I was looking it up. It ran at a cinema in Los Angeles for like 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And it ran in a cinema in Australia for like 3.5 years. So it had this real cult following.
Oh, like almost like a Rocky Horror kind of thing then.
Sort of, almost, yeah. But anyway, it was interesting.
Really
It was an interesting afternoon of watching movies. So. Yes, and yes, it was good. And I think the night before was when we watched this. So we just watched movies last weekend. We watched this, and then we watched Chopping Mall.
Oh, Chopping Mall's great.
and May had never seen Chopping Mall, so I thought I'm going to have you watch Chopping Mall. So yeah, so that was really cool. So I like the humor in the movie a lot. There is quite a bit of humor. I think Jamie is quite a funny character. I like the bit where he's picking up Mia, and he gives her the flowers, and something comes up, and he's like, "I couldn't find black roses,"
Yeah.
something like that. So,
I really liked when he brought her home, and he was like, I danced her off her feet, like trying not to get her in trouble because she's clearly just drunk.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, and they're kind of a cute couple, I guess.
Yeah, he's like an endearing guy.
Is off the rails. Yeah, he seems quite. No, he's like, he's a funny guy. So, but I was just like, once again, I was like, wouldn't they be sort of going, "Oh, where's Brent?" When they're at the at the dance?
I didn't think of it.
You'd be like, "Oh, where is he's supposed to be his best friend, right, or a friend?"
I think they
You'd be like, "Where is he?"
They kind of address that in the beginning because they say that Holly's parents are out of town, and I think he says, like, why would you even bother going to the dance? Just go to her house because you guys have the house to yourselves.
That whole thing, like I said, now I've spoken to you about it, though, I'm a bit more on board with the whole, Mia Jamie storyline. It's sort of, and when I watched it last night, I was like, okay, I can see parallels here with this, and it was quite, it's quite good. Did you had some other notes and some other stuff you wanted to mention? I think.
I think the only thing that I haven't mentioned is that, like, when I watched this the first time, I really got like almost like a John Hughes horror movie vibe from it.
Yes.
And it kind of hits some of the same beats as like Pretty in Pink. Just with like a pitch black lens. Like if you took Pretty in Pink and made it horrible dark horror movie, this is what you would get basically. Even the moment where the dad brings her the dress, that's kind of like a moment in Pretty in Pink. And I don't know, it was just it was a trip to watch this because it's really subverts your expectations of what it's going to be.
Yeah, it is. That's why, like I was saying, when I first watched it, I was like, "Is this a teen movie?"
Right.
And it almost has that sort of feel to it. Yeah, if John Hughes made a horror movie,
right? Yeah, and I was thinking of things like Deathgasm. Have you seen Deathgasm? That's a New Zealand film.
I think I have it on Blu-ray somewhere, but I don't think I've watched it yet.
That is so, like, if you want to watch something that's both horror centric, metal centric, and then just hilariously funny, totally recommend.
Oh, really?
Deathgasm.
Okay, I'll have to check it out because I do have. I think. Do you know where I think I got it? I used to get those.
I got it in a horror block too,
and that's where I got it as well. So I must have it. So it's probably not even an Australian.
Oh, I hope it is because it's
I'll
totally
it
worth it.
Is that good, huh?
I thought it was great. And I'm not a huge metal fan, so I didn't get all of the references, but I got enough of them that I was just like, this clearly whoever wrote this was a huge metal fan.
One of the other things in the movie I thought was quite interesting and a little bit sad was the point after Lola's father is killed. There's a point where she goes into her mother's bedroom and smothers her mother with the pillow and kills her. And I'm like, okay, she's having this point where she's at least thinking, well, my father's dead, so I might as well kill my mother now. And I'm wondering if she's just thinking, well, whatever happens from here on, I'm probably going to die at the end. And, you know,
I really saw it because of the way she was treating her mom earlier as, well, I don't like you and I don't want to have to deal with you. And the only thing that stopped me from killing you before was Dad. So I'm just going to get rid of you.
oh, maybe. Yeah, that's true. Isn't it interesting how different people view different things? Yeah. There's that scene at the when he's taking photos of the two of them, and he asks his mother, or he says, "Oh, I'll put bright eyes into the photo." And she holds her hair at the back, and when the flash goes off, she pulls on her hair so she yelps out.
And she shoves the chicken in her face, and
yeah. It's so, it's just really depraved. But that's cool. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you like things like Texas Chainsaw, it has a very Texas Chainsaw vibe as far as like the family dynamic and.
Yep. Well, actually, speaking of Texas Chainsaw, the scene where she gets crowned queen and he's the king, and she's got the little blowy thing.
Oh, yeah.
And he doesn't blow his whistle, and she tells him to blow his whistle, and it just there's just like this little meek unrolling.
Right,
of the little
that is great.
And that's very Chainsaw Massacre, I thought, as well. It's kind of that it was good. Any final thoughts?
Just I think this movie is brutal. And I think that the impact of its brutality was the same as when I saw it the first time. So it holds up super well. I was so glad to see how well it holds up, because especially that era of movies, I think, tends to sometimes be dated. And I was really pleased with how well it held up and how it still was so effective. And if you haven't seen it for whatever reason, totally recommend checking it out, especially if you're in the States and it's on Prime now. You have no excuse.
Yeah, and it's not a long movie either.
Yeah, no, it goes by at a clip. I mean, there's just make sure that you're not eating or anything when you watch it.
Yeah, it's a bit like that. Yeah, my thoughts are that if you can't tell by some of the confused sounding conversation, I was kind of blown away by this movie. I wasn't expecting what I saw.
Yeah.
I wasn't really sure, and I think part of that was because I did the right thing. Didn't watch trailers, didn't look at any wiki articles, didn't look at any reviews. I just went in stone cold. And it just kind of like, the first time was kind of like, holy shit, like, what is this? And then last night watching it again, it was kind of like another level. And it was just a really, really great movie. I was totally surprised, really enjoyed it. And the same, I'd recommend getting it. And Umbrella, if you're listening to this, I'd love you guys to do this. I don't know who has the rights to this, but it would be a great Blu-ray, especially if they had anything they could... any special, special features or extras or anything. I don't know whether they have that, but a commentary would be interesting.
Yeah, I would love to hear what Sean Byrne was thinking when he wrote and directed this.
So definitely a big recommend from me, and obviously from you as well. So that's good. Cool. So, as I ask everyone, and people that listen to this podcast already know you anyway, but let me know where everyone can find you and what you're up to, what Test Pattern are doing right now.
Okay. I'm on Test Pattern with Jacob. If you've listened to the Dead End Drive-In episode, you know all about that. But we pick 2 horror movies that sort of have a theme, and we talk about them for a very long time. And you can find Test Pattern at Test Pattern Show on Twitter, and testpatternshow.com for our website. And you can find me at Horror Flick Tab on Twitter. As far as what we're doing coming up, We've got a Wizard of Oz, Return to Oz episode coming up. And we also have an episode about the Warrens and The Conjuring coming up, which is going to be really fun.
It's interesting. I like the way you do these episodes that are a little bit away from the normal that you do. Like the Warrens one will be really interesting.
Yeah, I love anything that I can do a lot of research on. So that was really interesting. And I also have to plug our Golden State Killer episode that we just released not too long ago, because if you like true crime and you're not so much into horror, that is a really cool episode to check out, because we do true crime every once in a while.
That's a long episode.
It is.
Too,
It's
right?
What's a 2-part episode. It ends up being like 6 hours total, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's cool. That's cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on again. It's so great to have you on again. It's always a pleasure talking to you guys, whether it's here, whether it's on the Bad Movie Nights you guys host. They're fantastic, and thanks very much for coming
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for doing this movie. I'm so glad to get to talk about this with someone.
It's so great. Thank you very much. So when we come back, we'll have a look at what we're doing next time.
And now, preview time. When it comes to entertainment, you can't beat a good film. So let's take a look at what's coming your way.
May we introduce you to Patrick? He's playing dead. Or is he? He isn't dead. He isn't alive. Only Kathy cares, understands.
What do you call it when someone has the power to make things move around the room without touching them?
Magic.
Why are you doing this? What do you want? I don't think you are cut out to be a nurse in an institution like this. It's because of Patrick, isn't it? It's because I know too much.
And no one believes her.
Brian, he's going to think I'm mad unless you say something.
Not Dr. Roger.
160 pounds of limp meat hanging off a comatose brain. Can you imagine anything less aware than that?
Not her husband.
I'd like to discuss our divorce.
Not her lover.
Take a note of sarcasm.
Why was
Not the police.
Look, Mrs. Jeckard, please, let's not complicate this any further, will you?
Patrick?
Wait here.
You won't believe what Patrick does to people.
He's in the wall.
Doctor, it's Patrick. You know it's him, don't you?
If there is such a thing as a sixth sense, he's had 3 years to develop a beauty.
Too late, they all discover the power of Patrick.
Is that why you murdered your mother, Patrick?
Patrick.
Next time on A Dingo Ate My Movie, join me and Jeremy as we discuss the psychic horror of Richard Franklin's Patrick from 1978 and the 2013 remake by Mark Hartley. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this episode of A Dingo Ate My Movie. I want to thank all my guests who give their time to make this podcast possible, and a special thanks to you for listening. Don't forget, you can follow A Dingo Ate My Movie on social media. On Twitter, it's just Dingo Movie. Facebook and Instagram is Dingo Movie Pod. And of course, you can check out our website, dingomoviepod.com. So until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.
This year's Queen of the Dance is... Lola Stone!
Blow your whistle, King.